Hey, what's up, Castlers? Eladef07 here again to bring you Tournament of Champions action, but before I do, don't forget to hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. Now let's get to the game. This was game 2 of 2 between Marathonmomma with white and Rockdorne with black. In game 1, Rockdorne checkmated Momma in 49 moves. Let's see what happened in this game. Momma starts out with e4. Rockdorne then plays e5, followed by knight f3, knight c6, and then bishop b5 from Momma, the Rui Lopez opening. She develops her light squared bishop to immediately attack the knight on c6, the lone defender of the e5 pawn, like so. Let's continue. Rockdorne plays d6, bishop takes c6 check, Momma takes the knight, b takes c6, Rock recaptures the bishop, pawn to d3, bishop e7, Rock develops his dark squared bishop, bishop to e3, Momma also developing her dark squared bishop, knight f6, pawn to h3, preventing any pins from the bishop or advancement from the knight. Rock castles king side, knight c3, Momma develops her queen side knight. Bishop to d7, pawn to d4 threatens to win the pawn on e5 as it is attacked twice and only defended once. Pawn to h6 is a mistake because it leads to losing material. The engine felt e takes d4 was the better move, and it would lead to an even position with the line queen takes d4, c5, queen d3, bishop c6, and castles kingside. But back to the action. After h6, Momma plays the great move, d takes e5, because it will win her the pawn as Rock continues the exchange. D takes e5, and then knight takes e5. Momma's up a pawn on Rock, as you can see in the lower part of the screen. Bishop d6 from Rockdorne, knight takes d7, Momma takes the bishop, Rock recaptures, queen g4, Momma threatens to win the pawn on h6 because the pawn on g7 cannot recapture due to the absolute pin from the queen. So if the bishop was to take this, Rock can't recapture because that queen is pinning this pawn. Can't move, you can't put your king in check. Let's continue. So plays the excellent move of knight to e5, attacking the queen with tempo. Get that queen out of there with queen e2. Rook to e8. Momma castles king side. Knight g6. Rook a to d1 with the relative pin of the bishop to the queen by Momma. e7, Rock unpins his bishop and connects the rooks. Rook to d4. Rook a, b8 attacks the unguarded pawn on b2. Pawn to b3 rectifies the problem. Bishop to e5 from Rock attacking the rook. Rook to d3, Momma avoids the attack. Queen b4 is a good move. Rock has the bishop and queen hitting Momma's knight on c3 while it's only guarded by her rook. Knight a4 is unfortunately a mistake by Momma as she is about to give away the pawn on e4 for free. The better move was queen to d2. Because you now have two pieces guarding the knight, leading to the line pawn to a5, pawn to f3, pawn to c5, pawn to f4, bishop takes c3, rook takes c3, queen takes e4. Momma is even in material, but the evaluation bar shows Rockdorne has the better position. But back to the action. After knight a4, Rock snags the free pawn on e4 with his queen, and both players are now even in material. Knight c5 from Momma attacks the queen. Rock moves the queen to safety with queen to f5. Momma plays the best move, knight d7, forking the rook on b8 and the bishop on e5. Rook b5, Rock moves his rook to safety. Pawn to g4 attacks the queen. Queen to e4 is a good move by the animal because it defends the hanging pawn way over here on a7. The a7 square by pinning the attacking bishop. If Momma moves that bishop to gobble up what appears to be a free pawn, look what happens. Goodbye, queen. Momma then plays pawn to c4, which is unfortunately a blunder because it leads to the great move, knight f4 from Rock, hitting the rook and queen simultaneously. And Rock is even threatening mate on the next move if Momma is not careful by bringing his queen down to g2. Checkmate. Momma plays the best move, bishop takes f4. But by moving her bishop, she loses her queen and Rock gobbles it up. With the move queen takes e2, Rock now has a +6 lead in material, as you can see at the top of the screen. Rook e3 is played, Momma attacking the queen and bishop. Queen takes e3, good move, Rock snatching the rook. Momma recaptures the queen with her bishop and Rock is up by 2 material points after the exchange. We still have a game, Castlers. Rook to a5 is then played by the Rock. Pawn to a4. Bishop to c3. Knight c5 is a mistake because it leads to losing material with the brilliant exchange. Rook takes e3, sacking his rook. F takes e3, takes c5. Rock completes the exchange by capturing the free knight on c5. Those chess puzzles coming in handy, I see, as Rock is a +3 in material after the exchange. Rook d1 from Momma. Rook e5 hits the isolated pawn on e3. Momma defends the pawn and attacks the bishop on c3 with rook to d3. Bishop to b4, Rock moving his bishop to safety. King f2, Momma getting her king involved in the action. Pawn to a5. King f3. Pawn to f6, pawn to e4, bishop d6, king g2. Rock takes the free pawn on e4, taking a 4-point material lead. Momma threatens the rook with king f3, rook to e1 moves it to safety. King g2, Rock checks the king on e2, king f3, Momma threatens the rook again. Rock moves it to safety with rook to e5. Momma moves her king back to g2, the best option by her. Pawn to h5, Rock trying to bust up the defense. King to f3, pawn to h4, king to g2, pawn to g5, king to f3, e1, king g2. Rock checks the king. Momma gets closer to the rook, attacking it. Rook h2 moves the rook to safety. Momma with king to g1. Bishop g3 gives the bishop a nice outpost. Castlers, an outpost is an active square where the piece, in this case Rock's bishop, cannot be kicked out by a pawn. As you see, the pawn is already adjacent with the pawn. It's already past the bishop. If the pawn was on h2, it'd be attacking the bishop, but it's not the case anymore. So this makes for a nice outpost for the bishop. It's safe. Let's move on. Rook d8 check, Momma trying for a Hail Mary. Rock simply moves the king to f7. Rook a8. b2. Rock threatening the unguarded pawn on b3. Momma defends it with rook b8. Bishop f2 check from Rock. King to f1. Bishop b6 blocks Momma's rook that was defending the pawn on b3. Good move from the animal, Rockdorne. Momma can't defend the pawn, so she plays rook to d8. And Rock picks up the pawn. Rook d7 check, Momma attacks the king. Momma's still fighting even though she's down big. King e6, pawn to c5. Momma throwing up moves and seeing what sticks at this point. But Rockdorne is wearing Teflon, and he gobbles up the free pawn with his bishop. Momma recaptures a free pawn on c7, Rockdorne up by 5 material points after the exchange. King to d6. Rook f7, Momma going after the unguarded pawn on f6. Bishop d4 guards it. Rook f8. Rook takes h3, snags a free pawn. Rock picking off pawns as if he was Pac-Man. He now has a +6 lead in material. Rook d8 check from Momma. King c5. g2, Momma threatens Rock's rook. Rook to b3 moves the rook to safety. Rook a8. Rook g3 check from Rock. King to f1. King to b4. Rook c8. Momma puts the rook behind the opposing passed pawn, which helps to thwart the pawn's push to promotion. Try saying that 3 times fast. Rock says, I don't care, and pushes the pawn anyway. A lot of alliterations here, ladies and gentlemen. Pawn to c5 from Black as he is guarded by his Royal Highness and the bishop. Rook e8, Momma takes an open file with her rook. Rockdorne takes another pawn from Momma. Rook takes g4. Rock with an overwhelming 7-point material lead now. Rook b8 check. Momma not giving up, even though this is definitely resignation territory. But she's probably trying for a stalemate. King c3 from Black. King e2. Rook g3. Rook h8. Rook e3 check from Rockdorne. King to d1. Rook to f3. King e2, cat and mouse game going on between the two. Rook f2 check. Rock checking the king. Momma moves her king to d1. And castles, this allows for a forced checkmate in 4 moves. With the line, King d3, Rook e8, Rook a2, Rook b8, Rook a1 check, Rook b1, Rook takes b1, checkmate. Let's see what actually happens. After King d1, you got King d3 from Rockdorne, King e1, Rook g2 from the Rock. That's mate on the next move, actually. Rook b8, and finally Rook g1, checkmate. Game over. So the animal was able to defeat Marathonmomma for, at the time, his 6th and a half point of the tournament. To the leaderboard, now has a total of 7.5 points for the tournament after defeating me with the white pieces. He currently is in 2nd place in the tournament, as you can see right here. But unfortunately was eliminated from winning this tournament yesterday when checkmate in 4-2-7 defeated YDTD. He can still finish in 2nd place. Rockdorne played at a 92.3 accuracy in this game versus Marathonmomma. He actually had a brilliant move, according to the chess engine. Rockdorne won't win the LC crown, but he has represented himself well in the Tournament of Champions. Well, that's going to do it for me tonight. I'm Elodefo7 saying stay tuned, and I'll see you soon.